So the Luxembourg Stock Exchange created a database, which is called Data Hub. And so basically it's kind of a database where we feed in for each bond 150 data points.
Today, I have the pleasure to welcome in the studio Alain Kinsch. Welcome.
Welcome, Jérôme, thank you.
Alain is an independent director in companies such as Aperam, but he's also the chairman of the Luxembourg Stock Exchange. He's vice president of the State Council. And I've known you in the period of 2009 when you became CEO of Ernst & Young, or EY. And I witnessed firsthand how you transformed this company and turned it into the very high-performing company it is today. So today we're going to talk about three things: the financial industry in Luxembourg, the industry in general, and then we'll see where it's going from there. So can you present to us the reality of the financial place today in Luxembourg?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Jérôme. It's really a pleasure to be here. And you mentioned transformation in the context of EY. And I think the transformation is also the word for the Luxembourg Financial Center, in the sense that it is continuous transformation. I mean, we are where we are today with a financial center which is probably about 2/3 of our tax revenues for corporate income tax. It's 1/3 of our gross domestic product. So it's absolutely essential for the survival of our welfare state here in Luxembourg. The question really is, what do we need to do to make sure it stays like that? Well, the answer is we need to transform it continuously. So to give you a few examples, of course, I think we could talk hours and hours about it, but basically I think we need to, first of all, keep and deepen what we have. Very often you hear people saying, we need to do something else and diversify. Okay, all great, but let's already concentrate on what we have. And in what we have is, I'll take one example, which I'm pretty familiar with, which is private equity. As you know, here in Luxembourg, since probably 30 years, we have private equity players. And in the beginning, it was mainly to do intra-European acquisition. So a US private equity fund buying a company in Germany through a Luxembourg holding structure. Now, in beginning of the years 2000, we said, well, why on earth are these private equity funds not in Luxembourg? Because we have all the UCITS funds. And so basically, Luxembourg managed through creation of tools like the SICA law in 2004, the CIF law in 2007, the SASP, the Luxembourg Limited Partnership in 2013, to really create the vehicles which the investors, the LPs, want. And by doing so, we managed to attract to Luxembourg the middle office, first of all the back office, so accounting, then the middle office, internal audit, compliance, etc. And as we speak today, I have been recently speaking to most of the top 10 PE houses in the US and the UK. And basically all of them have, or almost all of them have, plans to do more in Luxembourg. So I think that from that perspective, it's an example of how over time you basically attract more business to Luxembourg from something which existed. So these people were there, but we are catering them now with additional products, new projects.
Yeah, and it's true that people see 2 decades or 3 decades of growth, but they forget that we had private banking or private banking secrecy who disappeared, but was compensated by the advent of private equity and, of course, the UCITS fund.
Exactly. It's a very good example. And now the idea is to, how do we deepen it? So deepen in the sense, what more can we do? And I always take the example, and you have it in every industry, in every business, is the value chain of production. And so in private equity, if I stay with my concrete example, we cover back office, middle office. We do not cover the upper side of the value chain, which is what you call the front office, which would be investor relations, so basically going out and gaining new investors, and then ultimately also some part of the deal making, or at least of the deal execution. And there you come to topics, maybe we touch upon it later, about talent attraction and all this. But so it's really about trying to position yourself throughout the entire value chain. So I think that would be my first thing. My second remark would be, okay, fine, but let's also try to diversify in some new things. So we did that already in the past, and an example which I really like a lot is when you say diversification, people think about new products. So why not new geographies? And Luxembourg did it with China, because we managed to attract the headquarters of the 7 largest Chinese banks to Luxembourg, who branched out into Europe.
And they do what the P you described used to do. They are basically coordinating the acquisition of infrastructure in Europe mostly.
Exactly. And I think it's a fantastic achievement, because Luxembourg, I was at the time when I was at EY very much involved in getting the first one, which branched out, which is ICBC, Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, to Luxembourg. And we were in competition with Paris, with Amsterdam, etc. And so it was a great work together between the private sector and the government. At the time it was Luc Frieden, who we know very well today, who was Minister of Finance. And so we were able to attract this bank. And so I think that's how you need to look at it. By the way, if I can make that remark, very pleased to read in the coalition agreement that there is a few lines on China, that we need to continue to work with China, and I'm very much in favor of that. And so that's an example of diversification. Now, looking into the future, I think Luxembourg, you cannot do everything. If you do everything, you do nothing. So you need to focus on something. Personally, I believe that one of the big topics is, of course, everything around ESG. And there are other topics, of course, artificial intelligence. I mean, there are at least 4 or 5 key mega trends. Yes. But I think ESG would be the one where I would emphasize on. To give you an example, I guess that many people here in our financial center know that we have already a good presence in ESG, for example, with the institution which I have the honor to chair, which is the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, because in 2016, my predecessor and the current CEO, Julie Becker, created the Luxembourg Green Exchange, which is the first green exchange and now the largest in the world. You have 1,800 sustainable bonds which are quoted there, so it's a fantastic achievement. But it's not enough. We need to do more. And so the more would be, for example, everything around green data. So the Luxembourg Stock Exchange created a database which is called Data Hub. And so basically it's kind of a database where we feed in for each bond 150 data points. Okay. And there are 12,000 green bonds in the world. They are all in. So it's an unbelievable database. Now, the next step is to say you take artificial intelligence, you plug it on the database, so that if I'm a private banker and you ask me, model me an investment portfolio, I want to have only green stuff, I don't want companies which have controversy, I don't want to have this, I don't want to have that, that I can basically go into the database, I say, like in ChatGPT, what Jérôme wants, and I get it.
Based on the data points, there's an algorithm, basically.
Exactly. We are not there yet, but this is an example of what I believe we can do, the combination between data and artificial intelligence. Last thing I can mention to you is that we quoted now in October the first digital native bond. So this is a bond which is on the DLT, the distributed ledger technology, which was issued by the World Bank, and which is fully MiFID compliant and everything. So basically, it shows you the type of innovation which we can do here in Luxembourg.
Yeah, and you've seen Clearstream investing heavily into Knipe and then Fonds DLT.
Exactly.
So as you say, it's continuously moving. So making sure that we keep on treating well the people who are already here. Yeah. I heard a lot, for example, I'm not going to give a name, but of people who are here feeling they are not helped enough because they're already here. And then continuing to do some progress wherever we're already good.
Yes.
Anything you would like to get rid of? I mean, we missed, I think, the train of the ETFs. Do we just say we are too expensive for that? Or do you see things where basically we don't add value anymore?
Yes. It's a very good point. I think we cannot win every battle. We need to choose which one we win. On the ETF, I mean, we have this problem that we do not have, and I believe we'll never get, the double taxation treaty with Ireland has with the US.
Exactly. And it was renewed recently, even better.
So, I mean, I don't want to say it's a lost battle, but this is not where I would spend most of my energy. Maybe now some people don't like what I'm saying, but that's my personal view. I think apart from the ETFs, there is, I mean, the whole UCITS environment, we have a lot to do because we have been losing a lot of business in our traditional UCITS business. you cannot see it when you look at the total number of assets under management. You could say, oh, it's still great. Yeah, it's great, but look at the others. Their curve is going like this, ours is going like this.
Exactly.
Why? And so of course, there is this eternal question on the tax d'abonnement.
There's no tax d'abonnement in Ireland,
Yes.
and there's a heavy one in Luxembourg.
There's no tax d'abonnement anywhere except in Luxembourg. But I have always been of the one saying it's not the biggest problem. I mean, there are, so I think it's one point, but there are points which I guess all of us have heard about. It's about talent attraction, it's about quickness, it's about all the things which made us
cost
great.
of operation.
Cost of operations. So there's a lot of things coming together. And I think that you need to look at it holistically of all the various things you need to do, and then maybe, yes, you need to do something on the tax d'abonnement, but this alone won't solve it.
Yes.
So that's the way I would see it. Yeah.
Okay, and if you want to see the numbers you were talking about, it's on efama.com. There's a very clear, we went from 5.9
Yes.
to 5.2 trillion,
Right.
and Ireland at the time was gaining
Exactly.
more. Okay, very good. Let's maybe move back to the real economy and something bigger. We know that we heard in the news the last decade that it was difficult to get some new industry. We had the narrative of startup nation, but when you look closely, there are a few projects like Nextgate Tech, but not enough to make it a sustainable source of tax for the country.
Yes.
So how do you see the global economy going forward?
Yeah, I think that's again a key question, because the financial sector, we are very much dependent on the financial sector, but we have many other things than the financial sector.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to continue to invest in it and diversify it. And I would say, if you look at the overall economy here in Luxembourg, there is a very strong base. And I don't want to appear like speaking too much of the past, but today, go to New York, look at the Freedom Tower. If you look at the Freedom Tower, you see 17-meter long Hista beams from Differdange.
Exactly.
If you go to Dubai, you look at Burj Al Khalifa, you see the glass from Sungard,
Exactly.
Luxgard in Dudelange. So there, and we are an expensive country. So this is because we are able to create value. If you look at Barack Obama's bust, his sculpture, it is made with a 3D scanner here from Luxembourg, from Artec, because Obama didn't like to have like plastiline in the face, so they did it with that. So, and you can find many examples like this. So there is a rich, I think, culture of innovation here in Luxembourg in the industry, and I think we need to continue to invest in that. And you mentioned it before about growth. The question: do you need growth, or can you have zero growth, or not much growth, or like 100% clean growth? So growth, a company has no pollution, there's no noise, there are no trucks, and the smell which comes in smells like roses.
And you don't need water.
I mean, come on. I remember when I was a kid, I lived in Battenberg, and basically sometimes we had on the radio, it was said you cannot eat the salad today because there was too much dust coming from ash.
Wow.
I'm still here, I didn't die, right? So I just didn't eat the salad that day. So, I mean, what I want to say by that is that we cannot have everything. You cannot have the quality of life we have, the social security system. Luxembourg is a very rich country which offers enormous advantages, and that's great. And even as we know, it's not enough, because here in front of the door we see people who sleep in the street, and so there's more to do. But all this comes with a cost. Mm-hmm. And that cost needs to be financed from something. And this something is tax. Tax paid by the companies and paid by the people. So we need to be able to attract these type of companies, even if it comes with the fact that we need to have land, which we put at disposal. Yes, it uses water. Yes, it uses electricity. And of course, I see this as a process. So everything which is around the green transformation, it's a process. Mm-hmm. And it takes some time. And you need to be sure that you don't do it too quickly, where you kill off your economy in a certain country. So I think that we need growth, because the ones who do not need growth, I always say, great. So tell me this 1 or 2% growth you don't want to have. These hundreds of millions, where are you going to take them away? Are we going to cut the congé parental by half? Are we going to eliminate part of the civil servants? What is it we're going to do? So this is why I think this is very academic thinking. It's very noble thinking, but I think in reality it doesn't work. You need to have growth, to be able to finance. But some could now say, oh, you're talking too much about money. But then I would also speak about human motivation. If you have no growth, I mean, I have seen in my career, we have recruited at EY about 400 people per year, young people coming from university. Of course they wanted to have a purpose. Of course they wanted to have ESG. But they wanted to have growth in their careers, a perspective. Where do I go? What do I learn? How do I progress? And progression means promotions. Promotions means you need to have growth. So I think it's also from a motivational perspective and for having a purpose in life important that people can project themselves into the future. Mm-hmm. So this is why I think it's important. Now, to come back a little bit more on the ground, where we can diversify. So I think that, again, I would deepen. So let's keep our steel industry. I mean, if I look in Europe, there are new steel mills built in Belgium, in other countries. So there's a lot happening in the steel industry. So I mean, or additional investments around steel processing, about scrap processing, etc. So what could we do here in Luxembourg around a competence which is already there? Automobile sector. I mean, it's not well known, but you don't find almost any car in the world where there is not something in it from Luxembourg. So I would say let's concentrate already in what we have here and then look for new things. The new things, you find them in the coalition program, like everything around, of course, space, where it's just amazing, again, that this little minuscule Luxembourg has a space agency and that we have a collaboration agreement with NASA. Clean tech, and then I would say health tech. I think medicine overall is sometimes, to me, a little bit the big elephant in the door, because when you speak about medicine, it's seen as something where you cannot talk about business when you talk about medicine. That there is this ethical conflict, or how can you make money out of medicine, out of people's illnesses? So it's an ethically complex topic, but I think that if you want to have the best doctors, the best researchers, the best of the best to innovate in medicine, and especially when it comes to biotech, for example, you need to find an environment to attract and to make it attractive for these people. And I think Luxembourg could do that, but I realize it's from a political standpoint, it's not an easy. It's easier said than done. But so I think, to conclude, I think there is a lot of stuff which we could do, and maybe the common denominator in all what I said is that you need people. So we need to be able to remain attractive, of course, for people who are mostly not from Luxembourg and who want to come here and stay here.
Yes, there may be one category you did not mention, which is the small entrepreneurs.
Yes.
I don't remember, but I think it's 30,000 companies, more or less. And we know, I mean, there's everywhere, some small shops, small restaurants. It has become extremely difficult to pay the rent, to get the indexation 3 times a year, to get this burden of constantly filling forms. Yes. And I guess this is also a big part of the GDP that Luxembourg needs to take care of. But that takes us to the big question. You mentioned all those initiatives. Already Jeannot Criquet was talking about biotech or data centers. My point of view is that we have fantastic people in the public service and we have fantastic politicians, but there's a massive lack of accountability. There start initiatives. I think the biggest example is the Startup Nation. It was repeated during 10 years, but when you look at the metrics, it's just not true, it's not happening. So how would you establish some kind of accountability in the political and public service spheres?
Yeah, I mean, this is not the easiest question you're asking
me.
And I would say we try to answer to it very directly. I would just first say, you mentioned, and I didn't touch upon that, but of course, there's a whole ecosystem of small companies, the startups, of course, but then also the butchers, the bakers, etc. And I would just, if you allow, make one comment on that, is that the more we have people working in the finance sector, in the overall economy, the more there will be people going to restaurants, people buying bread, people have money to buy bio products. So this is where I make a little bit the link on that level. And we should be careful about teleworking. I know there's a little demand, but it's not the same for Luxembourg than for France or Germany. Because if for Luxembourg, during a week, 20 or 40% of the workers are sitting in Thionville or in Trier, it's not the same than if these people, instead of Frankfurt am Main, are sitting in Hahn or somewhere else, because they're out of the country. They don't spend their money in the country. They lose the social connection anyway. Well, it was not your question, but I just wanted to make that point.
No, it's true. It's a fair point.
Yeah. Now, on the accountability, I think that this is actually is a question I'm personally, as I know you are very concerned by that question. I have been thinking about it a lot too. It's a question overall of how a democracy works, isn't it, to a certain extent?
Yes.
Because you and I, we are able to hold people accountable by voting.
Yes.
The problem is that as we find out, when people go to vote, they rarely vote for what you have been doing in the past. In French, you would say, ils ne votent pas un bilan, mais ils votent une promesse.
Yes.
They are voting the hope of what is going to come. Of course, people will remember something politicians did well or not well. But broadly speaking, in politics you say you don't win the election with the balance sheet of your past 5 years.
And maybe one word about this. I have to say that Luxembourg is an exception in a way that you see all over Europe some populists lying and getting a lot of votes. If you look at the campaign from this year, the general campaign, you didn't get that. It was a very nice talk, but you didn't have a fight about ideas. My feeling was they all want to behave nicely and be elected just for that, which I believe democratically is very dangerous.
Yes. Well, I would say that there is the part that Luxembourg is a small country and everybody knows each other and meets each other. And we never had this culture of strong fighting and also sometimes below the borderline. And I think that's more a good thing. I think that where I might a little bit disagree with you is on the fact that there would not have been discussion or debate about real ideas, because I think that one thing which we had this year, we had really two, in my view, very different models of the economy. We had a model which was more the parties from the left saying we want to have low growth, no growth or low growth or lower growth, call it like you want. And basically, you know, financial center is something a bit we don't like too much. And we want to tax the rich. And with that, we're going to help the poor. And so we're going to make the world a better place. And then you have the people on the right who said, this doesn't work. Because you need growth. The financial center is something good. You should be proud of it and invest more into it. And we need to have strong companies to make it a better world for everybody. So then for me, it was quite, I mean, I have been following politics for a very long time, and I haven't experienced it as this, I feel, as far as the economy is concerned.
My feeling is it didn't stick.
Maybe it didn't stick.
You know, you've got some example of populists who, they say something and it goes in people's minds. Here you looked at the debate, they were very kind to each other, this very friendly. But they didn't have the ability, maybe except Xavier, of course, which is Xavier Bettel, an extremely good communicator, and he can lend his message. But the others, they were talking, you agreed when they talked, but after you left, you couldn't say to your friend what they said, basically. Yeah. And that's, I think, a massive issue, because ultimately you get elected, but you don't get a clear mandate.
Yeah.
And my belief is there's no choice. The country needs to be reformed. But I didn't hear once the word reform throughout the campaign.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe because I'm watching also the Luxembourgish news.
Yes.
So I get the table ronde and everything in Luxembourgish. Maybe it's a bit easier there, or it's clearer there than when they speak in French, English, or German.
I looked at it in Luxembourgish.
Yeah, okay, no, fair enough. But I think that I had the impression that if I listen to Luc Frieden or Xavier Bettel, I have a completely different world I get than if I listen to Paulette Lehnert or Franz Feier without saying, you know, everybody needs to make up his or her mind what he likes more. But for me, these were very different positions on the economic topic.
No, that's true. LSAP was a bit shocking with the additional week
Yeah,
of
for example,
holidays. That was borderline populist to me when you look at the economic numbers.
I think so, yes, yes. But to get back on your initial question on accountability, I think that if democracies want to continue to survive, and nowadays it's not really what we see, right? Because it's more the autocratic, how do you say, in the autocratic regimes, which seem to be in period of crisis a little bit, sometimes even more effective than we are, and more right-wing parties get a lot of support. So I think I have always, my view has always been, you cannot say, oh, it's because these people either they are stupid or they are frustrated, so they vote for Le Pen or for AfD. No, maybe they like the ideas. So I think you need to take that seriously and not just do like if this is just a non-permanent phenomenon. So I think one needs to take that seriously. Of course, fight against it, in my view, but not by doing like if all the people who vote for them are just frustrated. I think that's absolutely not the case. And maybe these parties have some very valid points too, and instead of pushing them into a corner, try to take the points which are good and try to deal with them. And I think that's what is currently happening when you see what also more traditional parties are doing on immigration or on other topics. And I think that direction is probably good. However, the issue remains that for democracies to continue to thrive, which we all hope, and which I hope, I mean, I'm a member of the Democratic Party since I'm 16, is that we need to put accountability more visible.
How do you do that?
How do you do that? I mean, you could say you do like at EY, like before, you do an evaluation system and ministers get evaluated and they get etc. But we know that this is not how it will happen, and it's probably also not the right answer. But I think that, like for example, in a private company, if you have, as a CEO, your business plan, you define your vision, your mission, and your business plan, well, you have an Excel sheet behind with all the actions, and you monitor, maybe with yellow, green, and red lights, how it is progressing, right? And your fellow board members or your fellow partners will not want you to continue to run the company if you don't achieve based on that transparent accountability. So one may think about if you take the coalition agreement now, well, you know, it's public. You could think about tracking also the progress.
It's big, huh?
Yeah, but you can summarize it. And actually, I think there have been some of these efforts which have been done, because, I mean, to be fair, in the former government, actually, ministers from all the parties, the Blues, the Greens, and the Reds, came in front of the press and published their bilan. And they have said, here's what I've done, maybe also here's what I have not done. So I think this is really good. But instead of having it every 5 years, maybe you should have it every 6 months. And that creates, I think, accountability. It's not always pleasant to come and say, sorry, I did not progress on this one, but here are the reasons. But I think that people would appreciate and that it can only strengthen the governance and the government at the end of the day.
Maybe one question to conclude. We're at the KPI, and in companies like the Big Four, normally the assessment of the situation is quite clear. Right? You guys have data sets, it's very clear. Don't you think that just before we get the KPIs, the new government needs to align everybody on the economic reality? Because I publish numbers on LinkedIn every day almost. The numbers are quite clear. It's a difficult financial situation. I don't have the feeling that all voters are aware of that.
Yeah, I think it's also a fair point because, well, they have two things. First of all, as you know very well, it depends on which figures you look at, from which institute, at what date, and then how you interpret them. But it's true that it's important for people to understand in what situation we are today. So those who go on the radio and say, we want more, there are 4 index tranches which are going to be adjusted in the barème, but we want 8, or we want this, we want that. Fair, but okay, what is the current situation?
How do you finance it?
How do you finance it? And is everybody really aware that the financial situation today of the Luxembourg budget is not super good? I mean,
I give normally one example which is not really debated. It's I think the whole budget of the state is calculated
yes.
on a 3% growth of GDP. If you take indexation, we can count 4 now.
Yes.
We have projection of the government, I think, expecting 2.4 next year, which would be below. But the EU says, no, you're going to be at 1.4. So whoever's right, we're still below. And this is a kind of reality that tells me our economy today is just not sustainable.
Yeah, but I think that there is one point of being transparent about the stages of the economy. So the debt, the growth, the unemployment, or the key figures. And you don't have to have done a bachelor in macroeconomics to understand that this situation is not great. I mean, it's not dramatic, but it's not great. I think what makes it potentially a little bit dramatic is that we have always financed part of our state budget, what is called the central administration, by an excess of income in our social security system.
Yes.
And this will most likely no longer be the case in the future. To that you add the pension issue. So there is an longer term, or I would say medium term, issue of sustainability because of the social security and the pension system. Now, what I however believe is that I'm rather optimistic side, and this is also why I actually think that the new government's point to say we will basically be able to finance our program through additional growth, and that the additional growth will generate more tax income, I think is the right approach.
Yes.
Some people say, yes, but it has been done in the past in certain countries. This is not completely correct, because I learned, at least when I did my macroeconomic studies, that when you go through the details, it failed for different reasons. So I think that this is absolutely doable. And at the end of the day, I would even say, what else do you want to do? So it's the only way, I believe, to sustain our Luxembourg welfare system if we table on creating this additional growth. And to be a little bit provocative, we say then, well, we will have too many people living in Luxembourg. So we have now a problem that we don't have enough apartments.
Housing, yes.
Enough housing. But this is not because Luxembourg is too small. We are not Vatican, and we are not Andorra. We are 80 miles long and 40 miles large.
There's a lot of fields everywhere.
A lot of places. There's plenty of place. Yes. There was an article by somebody who is not from my party, by Robert Goebbels in LuxembourgOfficial, where he took the card of Luxembourg and he put like a puzzle all the countries in Luxembourg which you can put in without them touching themselves. So he put, of course, Vatican and Liechtenstein, but he also put Hong Kong. He put Singapore.
Of course.
And so I think it was more than 20 million people which you can fit. But I'm not saying you should fit 20 million people. But I find it also a bit ridiculous when we speak about we go from 700 to 1 million. I say like 1 million, come on, it's nothing. The country is big enough. It's a question of we don't get our infrastructure quickly enough behind the number. That's the problem. It's not the number, it's the infrastructure.
It's the vision and the anticipation.
Yeah, it's the public transportation, it's the apartments, it's all the stuff which you need to have. And you can do that in an ecological way. So it's not a number problem, it's a problem of creating this public infrastructure. I'm quite relieved to read in the program that the government tries to make a cooperation between the public and the private sector to build this housing. And I think everything which needs to be done has been said. Build quicker, higher, the procedure. So we know I think everybody knows what has to be done. Now it just needs to get done.
Implementation.
Yes.
Well, one thing is sure is that we're all rooting for the government because we're all in the same boat and we all want a sustainable Luxembourg. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to share with you your experience and your expertise. Mr. Kinsch, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.